Did you know a medieval monk who could only speak one language became Europe's greatest international preacher through a supernatural miracle? St. Vincent Ferrer was a Spanish Dominican friar who spoke only Valencian, a dialect from his homeland. Yet from 1399 to 1419, he traveled across Europe preaching to massive crowds, who each heard him in their own disperfect language. Picture this. Vincent would stand before thousands of people from different countries, speaking only in Valencian. But French peasants heard flawless French. Italian merchants understood perfect Italian. English nobles heard impeccable English, all from the same sermon, all at the same time. This gift of tongues allowed him to convert over 25,000 people, end bitter family feuds, and even resolve the Western Schism by convincing rival popes to step down. His crowds grew so large that cathedrals couldn't hold them. He preached in open fields to over 10,000 people at once. Germans, Hungarians, Greeks, and Flemings all stood together, each understanding every word in their native tongue, while Vincent spoke only Valencian. Sometimes God breaks every barrier to reach human hearts, even language itself. Did you know a single bishop faced down the entire Viking world and lived to tell about it? Saint Rambert became Archbishop of Hamburg-Bremen in 865, right when Viking raids terrorized all of Europe, but instead of hiding behind castle walls, he sailed straight into their territory. For 23 years, Rembert made dangerous journeys into Denmark and Sweden, preaching Christ to pagan kings and warriors. Pirates attacked his ships repeatedly, but he always survived. He ransomed Christian slaves from Viking markets with his own money and built the first permanent churches in hostile territory. The most incredible moment came when raiders captured Rembert himself. Instead of begging for his life, he preached to his captors during imprisonment. Amazingly, several Vikings converted and freed him. Through patient courage and brilliant diplomacy, this fearless archbishop slowly transformed the most violent warrior culture in Europe. By the time he died in 888, Christian kingdoms were rising where pagan longships once ruled. Sometimes the greatest victories come not through force, but through faith that refuses to surrender. Did you know one Spanish priest baptized 300,000 enslaved Africans in the most horrific conditions imaginable? In 1606, Peter Claver arrived in Cartagena, Colombia, where thousands of enslaved people were brought from Africa every year. This young Jesuit made a shocking vow to be slave of the slaves forever. For 40 years, Peter boarded every slave ship that entered the port. He descended into the disease-filled holds where people lay dying, chained together in their own filth. While slave traders saw only profit, Peter saw human souls created by God. He learned African languages to speak comfort to the terrified captives. He brought food, medicine, and clean water to the sick. He baptized the dying and buried the dead with dignity. Many witnessed miraculous healings through his touch. The slave owners hated him. They threatened his life for treating enslaved people as equals. But Peter never stopped. His exhausting ministry continued until a paralysis ended his work. When he died, former slaves he had served gathered at his bedside, weeping for their spiritual father. Peter Claver reminds us that every human being deserves love and dignity. Did you know one saint survived his own martyrdom, only to demand a second one? In 288 AD, Sebastian served as a secret Christian officer in Emperor Diocletian's elite Praetorian Guard. By day, he protected the emperor. By night, he snuck into Roman prisons to comfort condemned Christians. When his double life was discovered, his own soldiers arrested him. Diocletian felt utterly betrayed. "Shoot him full of arrows!" the emperor commanded. The archers fired so many arrows that Sebastian looked like a porcupine. Left for dead, he was discovered by Saint Irene, who found him still breathing. She secretly nursed him back to health. Most people would have fled Rome forever. Not Sebastian. Instead, he marched straight back to Diocletian's throne room. The emperor's face went white with shock. "You're supposed to be dead!" Sebastian boldly denounced the persecution of Christians, demanding justice. This time, Diocletian ordered him beaten with clubs until his body was unrecognizable. Sebastian's courage reminds us that some truths are worth dying for, twice. Follow for more stories of the saints. Did you know 9 sisters became saints on the same day after watching each other die for their faith? In 5th century Spain, Princess Quiteria and her 8 sisters lived a dangerous secret. Born to a pagan king in Galicia, they had converted to Christianity in hiding. When their father arranged marriages to pagan nobles, the sisters knew they faced an impossible choice. Under cover of darkness, all 9 escaped to the mountains. For months, they lived as fugitives, praying and strengthening each other's faith, but their freedom couldn't last forever. When soldiers finally captured them, the king's rage was terrible. He ordered their execution across a single horrific day. One by one, Quiteria watched her sisters die. Some were beheaded, others burned alive or crucified. Each faced death with prayers on their lips. As the eldest, Quiteria was saved for last. Crucified while her sisters' bodies lay nearby, she forgave her executioners with her final breath. Immediately, witnesses reported miraculous signs. Within years, all 9 were venerated as saints across Spain and Portugal. Their story reminds us that faith shared makes us stronger, even unto death. Did you know a 13th century servant girl could make time literally stop? St. Zita worked for a wealthy family in Italy from age 12. While other servants mocked her constant prayers and kindness to the poor, something miraculous was happening. When Zita gave her master's bread to hungry beggars, angels replaced it with even better loaves. The family was amazed, but that was just the beginning. Witnesses saw Zita levitate several feet off the ground while kneading bread, floating in prayer as she worked. She could appear in multiple places at once, helping wherever needed. The most incredible miracle happened on Christmas Day. Zita attended Mass so long that she returned hours late to find the kitchen fires cold. Yet somehow dinner was perfectly cooked and ready. Time itself had stopped while she prayed. Her 48 years of faithful service transformed the entire household, from wealth-obsessed masters into devoted Christians. Through humble work and extraordinary faith, this simple servant girl showed that God works miracles through the most ordinary tasks. St. Zita reminds us that holiness isn't found in grand gestures, but in faithful service to others. Did you know one man tried to save all human knowledge as the Roman Empire crumbled around him? In 600 AD, as barbarian armies swept across Europe, St. Isidore of Seville began an impossible mission. He would capture everything humanity knew before it disappeared forever. Every day from dawn until midnight, Isidore wrote, his hands cramped as he copied ancient manuscripts on medicine, mathematics, law, and science. He trained scribes, built schools, and debated Visigoth kings to convert them to Christianity. His masterpiece was the Etymologiae, 20 volumes trying to hold all human learning in one place. As his health failed, Isidore wrote faster. Time was running out. He died at his writing desk, quill still in hand, ink wet on the page, but his encyclopedia survived. For 800 years, it became medieval Europe's most important textbook. Monks copied it in monasteries across the continent. Classical knowledge that should have been lost forever lived on. Today, Isidore is the patron saint of the internet, the man who first dreamed of organizing all information for future generations. Sometimes the greatest victories happen on one page at a time. Did you know that one princess's desperate prayer changed an entire empire forever? In 988, Princess Anna left the golden palaces of Constantinople for a terrifying arranged marriage to Vladimir, the brutal pagan ruler of Kiev. As her ship sailed toward the barbaric Russian wilderness, she wept and prayed for a sign that God wanted her in this dark land. Then the miracles began. Church bells rang by themselves during her secret prayers. Sacred icons wept in her presence. Most incredible of all, she instantly understood the Slavonic language without ever studying it, and knew these were her answers. Working quietly through the royal court, she shared Christ's love with anyone who would listen. She built the first Russian churches and monasteries. Her patient influence slowly melted Vladimir's heart until he too embraced the faith. Then came the moment that shook history. On Vladimir's orders, the entire population of Kiev walked into the Dnieper River for mass baptism. Human sacrifice ended forever. One woman's faithful prayers had transformed Europe's most savage kingdom into a Christian empire. Sometimes God uses our deepest fears to accomplish his greatest miracles. Did you know a single monk repeatedly risked death to bring Christianity to the most violent warriors in Europe? St. Ansgar, known as the Apostle of the North, spent 40 years on dangerous missions to Viking Denmark and Sweden starting in 826. His first mission to Denmark seemed successful until Viking raiders destroyed his school and church, forcing him to flee by sea. But Ansgar didn't give up. He traveled to Sweden where Vikings put bounties on his head, burned his churches, and murdered his converts. Assassination attempts and pagan riots followed him everywhere. His most dramatic escape happened when he hid in a merchant ship's cargo hold while Viking warriors searched for him above deck. They repeatedly destroyed everything he built, yet each time he returned to rebuild. For decades, failure and attacks seemed to define his mission. Vikings appeared unconquerable in their pagan beliefs, but Ansgar's persistent courage and unwavering faith slowly planted seeds that would transform Europe's most feared warriors into Christian kingdoms. His story reminds us that God's greatest victories often come through patient endurance, rather than immediate triumph. Did you know the youngest pope in centuries died mysteriously after defying an emperor in his own capital? In 536, 36-year-old Agapetus became pope during one of Christianity's darkest hours. Emperor Justinian controlled the Eastern Church through a heretical patriarch named Anthimus, who denied Christ's true nature. When Agapetus arrived in Constantinople on a diplomatic mission, Justinian demanded he recognize this false patriarch. standing in the heart of the Byzantine Empire surrounded by imperial guards. The young pope shocked everyone with 2 words: "I refuse." But Agapetus went further. He boldly deposed Patriarch Anthimus right in the emperor's own capital. Through brilliant theological debates, he converted Eastern bishops back to Orthodox faith. The emperor's religious control was crumbling. Then suddenly Agapetus died. He was only 36, just months into his papacy. Whispers of poisoning spread immediately. Miraculously, his body remained perfectly preserved during the long journey back to Rome. His courageous stand against imperial religious control established crucial precedents for papal independence that shaped church-state relations for centuries. Sometimes the greatest victories require the ultimate sacrifice. Did you know angels once worked a farm while a saint attended Mass? In 12th century Madrid, a simple peasant named Isidore began each day with hours of prayer. His boss complained that Isidore was neglecting his farm work to go to church, but fellow workers witnessed something incredible. While Isidore knelt in prayer, glowing figures appeared in his fields. Supernatural beings guided his plow in perfect rows. Invisible hands planted seeds with divine precision. Celestial workers completed entire days of labor in mere minutes. Despite spending less time farming than anyone else, Isidore's crops always produced the most abundant harvests. During a terrible drought that threatened the entire region, Isidore struck his staff against the dry earth. Fresh water gushed forth, saving everyone's crops. Wild animals became gentle in his presence. Birds ate from his hands like trusted friends. He shared everything with the poor, and remained humble despite his growing reputation for miracles. St. Isidore shows us that when we put God first, he provides for all our needs in ways beyond our imagination. Did you know a saint once promised to send flowers from paradise? In 4th century Turkey, St. Dorothy was a beautiful Christian who refused to marry or worship pagan gods. Emperor Diocletian ordered her execution for her faith. As Dorothy walked to her death, a lawyer named Theophilus mocked her, shouting, "Dorothy, send me some roses and apples from paradise." She smiled and promised she would. Minutes later, the executioner's sword ended her life. Theophilus went home laughing about his cruel joke. But within hours, something impossible happened. A mysterious child appeared at his doorstep carrying a basket of the most beautiful roses and apples he had ever seen. They were impossibly fresh and fragrant, glowing with otherworldly beauty. This was the dead of winter when no such fruits could grow. The supernatural flowers never withered or decayed. This miracle instantly converted Theophilus, who was later martyred for his newfound faith. Dorothy's promise from paradise transformed a mocker into a martyr. Sometimes God's love reaches us through the most unexpected messengers. Did you know that some workers in Jesus' parable got paid a full day's wages for just 1 hour of work? Picture this. The sun is setting and desperate day laborers still stand in the marketplace. No work means no food for their families tonight. It's the 11th hour and literally 1 hour before darkness ends all opportunity. Then a vineyard owner approaches. He offers them work for this final hour. Think about their choice. 1 hour of work for probably just a few coins. It seems almost pointless. But these men demonstrate remarkable faith. They say yes. They believe that even 1 hour matters. Even minimal work has dignity. Even when hope seems foolish, they trust and follow. When payment time comes, something shocking happens. The vineyard owner pays them the same full wage as those who worked all day. Their faith in accepting seemingly insignificant work is rewarded beyond imagination. Christ's message is clear. God's grace isn't earned by our hours of service. His generosity exceeds human fairness. Sometimes our greatest act of faith is simply showing up when hope seems lost. What 11th hour moment is God calling you to trust him in today? Did you know a Polish king once murdered a bishop right at the altar during Mass? In 1079, St. Stanislaus faced the most shocking martyrdom in church history. Born to humble farmers, Stanislaus rose to become Bishop of Krakow through his wisdom and holiness. But when King Boleslaw the Bold began murdering nobles and committing adultery, this fearless bishop spoke out. From his pulpit, Stanislaus publicly condemned the king's crimes. When Boleslaw refused to repent, the bishop took an unprecedented step. He excommunicated the monarch during Sunday Mass, declaring him cut off from the church. The king's rage knew no bounds. On May 11, 1079, Boleslaw stormed into the cathedral during the sacred liturgy. As Stanislaus knelt at the altar celebrating Mass, the king drew his sword and struck down the holy bishop where he prayed. But the king's horror wasn't finished. He ordered his soldiers to dismember Stanislaus and scatter the pieces to prevent any veneration. Yet God had other plans. Witnesses reported the body parts miraculously reunited overnight. The king went mad and fled into exile, while Stanislaus became Poland's beloved patron saint, forever remembered as the bishop who died defending truth against tyranny. Follow for more stories of the saints. Did you know a Christian widow once saved a saint from death only to watch him choose martyrdom anyway? In 288 AD, Saint Irene of Rome discovered something shocking. Saint Sebastian, who had just been shot full of arrows by Roman soldiers, was still breathing. While everyone thought he was dead, this brave widow secretly carried him to her home. For weeks, Irene nursed Sebastian back to health, hiding him from the soldiers hunting Christians. She gave him food, medicine, and safety. When he was completely healed, Irene begged him to flee Rome and save his life, but Sebastian refused. He told Irene that God wanted him to return and confront Emperor Diocletian about the persecution of Christians. Despite her tears and pleas, Sebastian walked back into certain death. The emperor immediately had him arrested and beaten to death with clubs. This time, there would be no recovery. Once again, faithful Irene retrieved his body, giving him a proper Christian burial. Her courage and compassion made her the patron saint of widows, and all who care for the persecuted. Sometimes love means letting others follow God's call, even when it breaks our hearts. Did you know a former pagan princess once hosted the most important church meeting in English history? St. Hilda of Whitby was born into Northumbrian royalty, but abandoned her pagan roots to follow Christ. She became the most powerful abbess in Anglo-Saxon England, founding a revolutionary double monastery where monks and nuns studied scripture together. In 664, Hilda hosted the famous Synod of Whitby at her monastery. Kings, bishops, and abbots gathered to decide a crucial question: would English Christianity follow Celtic or Roman traditions? The debate was fierce, covering everything from Easter dating to papal authority. Though Hilda initially supported Celtic customs, she humbly accepted the Roman decision that unified English Christianity forever. Her influence extended far beyond politics. She mentored future saints and bishops, including St. John of Beverley. Most remarkably, she discovered Cædmon, a simple cowherd who couldn't read but received divine visions of Christian poetry. Under her encouragement, he became England's first Christian poet. Hilda's legacy reminds us that true leadership means serving God's will above personal preference, and that humble obedience can shape entire nations for Christ. Did you know the only pope ever executed by drowning performed miracles even in his final moments? This is the incredible story of Saint Clement of Rome. In 99 AD, Clement served as the fourth pope, after St. Peter himself. His powerful letters to the Corinthian church became foundational Christian texts that we still read today. Through his fearless evangelization, he converted thousands of Romans, including members of Emperor Trajan's own imperial family. Trajan was furious. The emperor couldn't tolerate Christianity spreading among Roman nobility. He sentenced Clement to brutal hard labor in the stone quarries of Crimea, hoping to break him, but even in chains, Clement continued serving God. When fellow Christian prisoners were dying of thirst, he prayed desperately for help. Miraculously, a fresh water spring burst from the rocky ground, saving their lives. When Trajan heard about this miracle, his rage knew no bounds. He ordered Clement's execution by drowning with an iron anchor tied around his neck in the Black Sea. Yet even death couldn't silence this holy pope. Legend tells that each year on his feast day, the sea would recede, revealing his preserved body in the anchor, allowing faithful pilgrims to venerate this martyr pope before the waters returned. Clement's unwavering faith transformed persecution into triumph, showing us that God's power works even through our deepest suffering. Did you know a 7th century bishop survived having his tongue cut out and eyes gouged out, yet still refused to bow to a tyrant king? St. Leodegar was bishop of Autun, fearlessly reforming the corrupt Frankish clergy and defending church independence. When the brutal king Ebroin seized power in 675, Leodegar became his greatest enemy. Ebroin demanded the church submit to royal control. Leodegar refused and sheltered political refugees fleeing the king's violence. This act of defiance sealed his fate. Soldiers dragged the bishop from his cathedral. First, they sliced off his lips and cut out his tongue to silence his powerful preaching. When that failed to break him, they gouged out his eyes, leaving him blind and mute. But Leodegar found new ways to communicate through writing and gestures, continuing to inspire his followers. Witnesses reported miraculous healings during his torture, converting many to Christianity. After 4 years of imprisonment and systematic mutilation, Ebroin finally ordered his execution. Leodegar was beheaded, but his martyrdom sparked a civil war that toppled the tyrant king. His sacrifice established lasting precedents, protecting church independence from royal interference. Follow for more stories of the saints. Did you know a bishop once survived being thrown into a river with a millstone tied around his neck? In 308 AD, St. Quirinus of Setia faced the most brutal persecution imaginable. Emperor Galerius had one mission: break the Christian bishops at any cost. When Governor Maximus arrested Quirinus, the torture began immediately. They forced him to watch his own deacons suffer first, hoping to shatter his resolve. But when they demanded he worship pagan gods, Quirinus declared boldly, "Christ is my only king." Furious, they tied a massive millstone around his neck and hurled him into the river. Miraculously, the stone floated, and Quirinus survived. Even in prison, his faith never wavered. He continued preaching to anyone who would listen, converting his own guards to Christianity. Finally, they cast him into the Rob River, where he drowned as a martyr. But death wasn't the end. Christians recovered his body, and immediately miracles began happening. These signs were so powerful that the entire region converted to Christianity. Sometimes our greatest defeats become God's greatest victories. Follow for more stories of the saints. Did you know a Holy Roman Empress once walked barefoot across red-hot iron to prove her innocence? In 1146, St. Kunigunde faced the ultimate test of faith. Kunigunde and Emperor Henry II shared an extraordinary marriage. Both secretly vowed to remain virgins their entire lives, dedicating themselves completely to God while ruling the empire. Together they founded monasteries and cathedrals across Europe, but nobles demanded an heir. When Kunigunde couldn't provide one, whispers of adultery spread like wildfire. Accused publicly of betraying her husband, she chose trial by ordeal to clear her name. Before thousands of witnesses, glowing iron plowshares were laid across the cathedral floor. Kunigunde calmly removed her shoes, lifted her chin, and walked slowly across the blazing metal. The crowd held its breath. She emerged completely unburned. Not a single mark touched her feet. Her accusers fled in terror, knowing they had witnessed divine intervention. After Henry's death, this powerful empress gave up everything. She founded a convent and lived as a simple nun, washing dishes and tending gardens until her death. True holiness often hides in humble service. Did you know that one woman's act of compassion during Jesus' crucifixion created one of Christianity's most sacred relics? As Jesus carried his cross through Jerusalem's streets, his face was bloodied and swollen from brutal Roman scourging. The crown of thorns had torn his flesh. He was barely recognizable. Through the hostile crowd, a woman named Veronica pushed forward. Some believe she was the same woman Jesus had healed of bleeding years before. Roman soldiers surrounded the procession, but her compassion overcame her fear. As Jesus stumbled under the cross's crushing weight, Veronica broke through the crowd. She risked arrest by interfering with a Roman execution, but she couldn't watch him suffer without acting. She reached out with her veil and gently wiped the blood and sweat from his sacred face. When she pulled the cloth away, something miraculous had happened. Jesus' face was perfectly imprinted on the fabric, not painted or drawn, but mysteriously transferred with a perfect clarity. The early church treasured this holy relic. It inspired countless works of art and devotion to Christ's holy face. Today it rests in St. Peter's Basilica, reminding us that even small acts of love can become eternal. Did you know a saint once walked on water back to his own execution? St. Pantaleon was Emperor Diocletian's personal doctor in ancient Rome. He had everything: wealth, power, and the emperor's trust. But when he secretly converted to Christianity, his life changed forever. After performing healing miracles in Christ's name, his faith was exposed. The emperor was furious and ordered his execution. But something incredible happened. Lions refused to attack him. Molten lead cooled instantly around his body. When thrown into the sea with stones tied to his neck, he walked on water back to shore. A torture wheel broke apart beneath him. Boiling oil felt like a cool bath. Each failed execution only strengthened his faith and amazed the crowds watching. Finally, Pantaleon asked God to let him join Christ in heaven. As he knelt for his final prayer, a tree miraculously grew from the earth to support him. Only then did he achieve the martyrdom he desired. His unwavering faith reminds us that God's power is greater than any earthly force. Follow for more stories of the saints. Did you know a fragile young slave girl once survived an entire day of Roman torture that would have killed trained gladiators? In 177 AD, St. Blandina was dragged into the Lion Amphitheater. She was just a weak servant girl, while stronger Christians had already broken under torture. But something supernatural was about to unfold. For hours, Roman executioners hung her on a wooden post, burned her with red-hot irons, and sent wild beasts to attack her. Yet the animals mysteriously refused to touch her. Between her own torments, she encouraged fellow martyrs, shouting, "I am a Christian, and nothing evil happens among us." The hardened soldiers couldn't believe what they were seeing. This girl showed no pain. She appeared joyful, constantly speaking to someone invisible. Her supernatural endurance was so powerful that several Roman guards converted to Christianity on the spot, knowing they would face their own death. Even when they finally killed her with a bull, Blandina had transformed hearts through her unwavering faith. Sometimes God's greatest strength is revealed through our greatest weakness. Follow for more stories of the saints. Did you know a single bishop once faced down Attila the Hun and saved his entire city? In 453 AD, St. Lupus of Troy watched terror sweep across Gaul as Attila's army destroyed everything in its path. As the learned bishop who had once been a monk, Lupus governed Troy when the most feared man in Europe arrived at their gates. When Hun forces surrounded the city, Bishop Lupus made an incredible choice. He walked out alone to meet Attila, carrying only his episcopal staff. Picture this moment. One man of God facing the destroyer of nations. In their intense conversation, Lupus boldly challenged Attila's brutality and offered his own life to spare the city. Something extraordinary happened. Attila agreed to spare Troyes, but demanded Lupus come as his hostage to ensure the city's loyalty. For an entire year, the brave bishop remained captive with Attila's army, until the Hun king's death finally freed him. St. Lupus shows us that true courage comes from faith, not force. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not through violence, but through the power of moral conviction. Did you know that one of the most powerful saints in church history was completely unknown until 1802? When archaeologists discovered an intact tomb in the Roman catacombs, they found tiles spelling Lumina Pax Tecum Fii, meaning Philomena, peace be with you, along with symbols showing she died a virgin martyr. Nobody knew anything about her life. No stories, no biography, nothing. But the moment her relics were placed in a church, something extraordinary happened. Miracles began occurring immediately. The blind could see. The paralyzed walked. Deadly diseases vanished instantly. St. John Vianney, the famous cure of Ars, credited this mysterious teenage martyr with most of his miraculous healings. He called her his little saint. After investigating hundreds of documented miracles, Pope Gregory XVI officially recognized her in 1837. Her feast day became one of the most celebrated in 19th century Catholicism. Churches worldwide were dedicated to St. Philomena, whose power exceeded saints with detailed biographies. Sometimes God chooses the forgotten to show His greatest glory. Her silence speaks louder than any words ever could. Did you know 4 master sculptors chose death over betraying their faith? In ancient Rome, Severus, Severian, Carpophorus, and Victorinus were the empire's most skilled stone carvers. Their Christian art was breathtaking, their talent unmatched. But in 305, Emperor Diocletian summoned them with a deadly commission. He wanted statues of the pagan god Aesculapius for his new temple. The payment was enormous, the imperial favor beyond measure. Yet these 4 men faced an impossible choice. Their livelihood depended on sculpture, but carving pagan gods would destroy their souls. They met in secret, praying, wrestling with fear. Finally, they stood before the emperor united. Their hands, they had declared, were consecrated to God alone. Diocletian's rage was terrible. He ordered their artist hands crushed with hammers, their eyes burned with hot irons. Still they praised Christ. Finally, he sealed them alive in lead coffins and threw them into the Tiber River. Today, the 4 crowned martyrs watch over all artists who choose integrity over profit, faith over fortune. Their sacrifice reminds us that some things matter more than success. Did you know a 15-year-old boy once converted his own executioners through this power of his faith? In the year 250, Emperor Decius was hunting down Christians across the Roman Empire. When soldiers found young Venantius in Italy, they demanded he burn incense to the Roman gods. The teenager refused. What happened next defied all logic. As they hung him by his thumbs, he sang hymns. When they beat him with iron rods, he preached about Christ's love. They burned him with torches, stretched him on the rack. Yet through every torture, this boy showed supernatural peace and joy. His executioners had never seen anything like it. How could someone so young face such agony without fear? Several soldiers secretly converted, risking their own lives. When they threw him to wild lions, the beasts lay down peacefully beside him. Finally, they ordered his beheading. But even the executioner trembled as he raised his sword, and immediately after declared his faith in Christ. One teenager's courage in the face of death transformed the very men sent to kill him. True faith knows no age. Did you know an entire noble family once became saints together? In 6th century Constantinople, Senator Xenophon lived in luxury with his wife Mary and sons Arcadius and John, but God had different plans. After experiencing a spiritual awakening, the wealthy family made an extraordinary decision. They would abandon their riches and dedicate their lives to Christ as monastics. What happened next seems impossible. The family separated to pursue individual spiritual journeys across the Byzantine Empire. For decades they lived as monks and nuns in different monasteries, completely losing contact with each other. Then came the miracle. Years later, these 4 monastics met by chance during a pilgrimage. They didn't recognize each other at first, so transformed were they by their holy lives. But supernatural signs revealed their true identities. The reunion was considered a divine miracle throughout the empire. Their documented miracles and influence on Byzantine Christianity became legendary. The church canonized all four, making them the only noble family in history to achieve sainthood together. Their story proves that God calls entire families to holiness, transforming earthly bonds into eternal glory. Did you know that a 4th century bishop in Florence raised 5 people from the dead, including his own nephew? Saint Zenobius performed miracles that terrified the Roman Empire itself. The most incredible resurrection happened when a French mother traveled all the way to Florence, carrying her son who had died during the journey. She begged Zenobius to help her child. For 3 days, the bishop prayed over the lifeless body. Then suddenly the boy sat up completely healthy and alive. But here's the strangest part. He spoke perfect Italian even though he was French and had never learned the language. Word of these miracles spread across the empire. Roman officials investigated every claim, searching for fraud, but found none. They were so frightened by his power over death that they tried poisoning him multiple times and forced him into public trials. Pilgrims traveled from every corner of the Roman world to witness his miracles. When Zenobius finally died peacefully, church bells rang by themselves and trees bloomed out of season, making Florence a destination for faithful believers everywhere. True faith can move mountains and even conquer death itself. Did you know that 9 sisters became the only entire family ever canonized as martyrs? In 5th century Spain, St. Cuderia and her 8 sisters were daughters of a pagan king who secretly embraced Christianity. When their father discovered their faith, his rage knew no bounds. He had arranged marriages to pagan nobles, but all 9 sisters refused, choosing Christ over earthly power. Led by Cuderia, they attempted a daring escape into the mountains. One by one, they were captured and brought back in chains. Their father showed no mercy to his own blood. Quiteria, as their leader, suffered the most brutal death, crucifixion. Her sisters were beheaded, tortured, and burned alive, each dying with prayers on their lips. Their sacrifice shook the kingdom. Miraculously, their bodies remained uncorrupted, and immediate veneration spread across Spain and Portugal. Entire regions converted to Christianity, inspired by these brave young women who chose eternal glory over temporary comfort. The 9 sisters proved that sometimes the greatest victories come through surrender to God's will. Follow for more stories of the saints.